welcome to the Life in Film podcast. This is a live episode, and seeing as there's so many people here, I'm sure you all know who our guest is today. So if you could join me in a round of applause for our guest, Shaheen Baig. So we're all intrigued to know how this came about. You've got an amazing career. What were the first few steps? Was it always casting, or what was your interests growing up?
So can I check, is this on? All right, excellent. There's so many people. Thanks for coming. It's really early. Okay, how did it start? So I grew up in Birmingham. No one in my family had anything to do with the industry in any way, shape or form. And when I was at school, you know, they ask you to do like work experience. You have to go and do work experience. So at the time, I knew I wanted to work somewhere in the arts, but I didn't know where. So I ended up getting really lucky because my careers teacher knew her daughter was part of this film, video and photography workshop in Birmingham in an area called Small Heath. And I went and did 2 weeks work experience there, and it was kind of amazing because the whole workshop was made up of like freelance artists, people making films, video artists, photographers, and I learned how to take photographs, develop my own photos. I sort of helped out on video shoots and things, and it was a really kind of extraordinary kind of moment for me because I suddenly thought, oh, I feel like I kind of fit in with these people, although obviously I was really young. I was like 15. And so they really kindly let me come every week and just use the facilities and hang out and get to know people. And that sort of changed my life because up until that point I was like, I have no idea what I want to do. I then went to college and did film studies. And I didn't go to university because I wasn't like the best student. I'm not a particularly academic person. I found doing exams and things quite stressful. So I ended up moving to London because my sister was studying in London and she let me sleep on her sofa. So that's what I did. I came to London, I did all kinds of jobs. I worked in a bookshop in Camden for ages. And then I took myself back to college, learned how to use a computer. And at the end of that course, they said, you need to do work experience. So again, it was like another round of work experience. So I got the BFI yearbook and I wrote to every single production company in London, and one production company replied. And that was two people called Paul Tribitz and Trix Worrell. And Trix Worrell had made my favourite show growing up, Desmond's, which I loved. And so I went to meet them and they gave me work experience as like a producer's assistant. And then at the end of the 2 weeks, they gave me a job. So I worked as a producer's assistant for a couple of years. And then I sort of found myself being really interested in the casting department. And we were working on a film at the time called The Gambler with Michael Gambon. And I just ended up getting quite involved with the cast and doing the liaison for the cast and stuff. And somebody in the office said, oh, a friend of mine is looking for an assistant. You might be interested. And that was a casting director called Debbie McWilliams, who is brilliant and very, very experienced. And I wrote to her. She interviewed me. I am still and was like a sort of anorak about film, and I watched a lot of film and I watched a lot of European film. And I think Debbie liked that because she worked a lot in European cinema and she just took a chance on me, really. And that's how I started in casting. So I worked for Debbie for about 2-3 years, and then I went to work with Gina J, and I worked with Gina for about 8 years. And when I wasn't with Gina, I'd worked with this amazing casting director called Patsy Pollock. So I did a bit of all sorts, but I was an assistant for like about 9 years.
So, yeah, there's a lot of people there that obviously championed you.
Yeah.
But you also went out of your way to reach out to these people and get involved. And that was, you were the driving force behind that. When you work with someone like Gina J or, your associate casting.
Yeah.
How do you make that step from associate to casting director? That seems like it's quite a big...
It's really hard. It's really hard because there's no perfect time. And I'm still not, you know, I'm quite shy. I find the whole networking thing terrifying. And I think you're sort of bred to believe that networking is you have to network, it is the only thing you can do. And I just really struggled with that. I found it kind of painful, like I couldn't do it. And so there was a point when I thought, am I ever going to do this? Am I ever going to go on my own? And I was really lucky. I was working with Gina. She's amazing. We were working on brilliant projects. And I think in the end, it just sort of really organically happened. But I didn't work for a while. You know, I kind of went on my own and thought, oh, okay, I'll give this a go. But it took quite a long time to get work. And in those days, casting directors didn't have agents. So you sort of had to be in places to get for someone to know you, in order to be considered for a job. And because I didn't do any of that stuff, I just sort of waited. And I did all kinds of things. So I would do like kid searches on films. I would do kind of external associate work for people just to live. And I was working in the evening. I was working in the theatre in the evening. I did all sorts of things. I was packing envelopes. I did what I needed to do to survive. Because those first couple of years when you go on your own, you're not earning very much money at all. And you have to, you know, everyone is in a different situation financially, but I had to juggle lots of different things to keep going. And then I just sort of got to a place where I think because when I'd worked with Gina, we'd done a number of like massive searches. Billy Elliot was one. We did a film called The Others. And I got approached to do Peter Pan, which was a 3-studio film, which was nuts. And I went and interviewed for it, and they employed me to do the search for the kids. And that was my first proper job on my own. But I'd been sort of trying to do it on my own for about a year and a half before then.
I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of actors here, but there feels like there's a lot of parallels to being an actor and being a casting director, which I guess we don't really think about a lot of the time. So that in-between time, obviously you say that you were waiting, but you're also reaching out to people. How do you survive? Like, obviously you've got the little jobs and stuff, but we talk a lot about mental health, and that can be one of the hardest parts of being in the industry, the in-between time. Yeah. How do you sort of, what's your coping mechanism for when you're out of work? I mean, that's not a problem anymore, but at that point.
But I think when you start off, I think there are lots of elements to this industry that are quite lonely. And, you know, I wasn't from London as well. So even though I'd lived in London for a long time, there is also this sense of feeling like I came from somewhere else. Those first couple of years I sort of went on my own, it was really lonely. And I didn't put myself out there that much because it scared me. And I just, in my head, and it's still something I kind of stick by, I just thought, if I do the jobs that I'm being given, the best that I can do them, someone will notice that, and they'll give me another opportunity. And I bang on about this to my office all the time, and they probably roll their eyes, but I sort of think that what has kept me going, because I still don't have an agent, and I love agents, but I just think that someone is going to employ me because they see a piece of work that I've cast, and they like it, rather than I'm being pushed in front of them or I'm being made part of a package, you know? And I just think that I've always kind of, it's merit, really, on merit. I want to get work on merit. And so back then at the beginning, it was really hard. And some agents kind of were really kind, and they took me to the theatre and they kind of looked after me a bit. And then a casting director that I didn't actually know very well, called Abby Cohen, who doesn't cast anymore, but she's become one of my closest friends. She just sort of took me under her wing, and we ended up doing 3 or 4 films together. And she really kind of gave me the confidence to do it on my own. But she could see that I wasn't, you know, I wasn't in a position to be getting necessarily films in my own right at that point. So she was like, let's do them together. And it was amazing, really.
Well, yeah, as I think it's Arnold says, you cannot, you know, it's not a one-man show. You have to sort of have other people champion you and build you up and help you get there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing to see how far you've come, and you mentioned there Peter Pan, love that film. But there's a lot of big films that you did, as you say, as an associate. There was Love Actually, Goblet of Fire, all these like huge Hollywood movies. It must be difficult to then go, well, I'm going to go off and maybe the films, I'm going to have to almost start again, but you didn't really start again because the films you did, they were still at such a great level when you started going in and becoming a casting director yourself. Yeah,
but I think you've got to remember when you're an assistant or an associate, you're working under the umbrella of a casting director. So really you're working to their taste. And then when I sort of set up on my own and I did a couple of things like Love Actually and Goblet of Fire as a kind of external person, I was being hired essentially to do big kid searches. And again, I'm working to someone else's taste. So it can take a minute, like with anything, it can take a minute to work out what is your taste. And what is your taste separate to the casting directors you've trained with. And their taste absolutely, and their way of working absolutely influences you, for sure. And I'm really deeply influenced by Debbie and Gina and Patsy and Abby. But then you start to shape your own taste. And I think that definitely started to happen. I think the first couple of films, independent films, because that's what I predominantly work in, that came to me that really sort of in some way I felt reflected my taste were Control, which is a film I did kind of very early on in my career, that was directed by Anton Corbijn, who's an extraordinary photographer, and Brick Lane, that Sarah Gavron directed. And they were both projects that in some way reflected the things that I was passionate about. And that year when I did both of those films was probably the first year I thought, oh, well, maybe I can do this on my own.
Yeah, you definitely have. I can tell when it's one of your movies. Like you have there is such a feel to your films. And I have to mention, because the casting in this film starred up.
Oh, yeah.
Ben Mendelsohn. I would have never imagined him in that role, but he is brilliant in that. How did that casting come about?
I love that film. Gosh, it feels like a long time ago. So when we were casting Startup, it's the first time, actually no, it's not the first time. I'd worked with David Mackenzie before because I did a film called Perfect Sense. And we did a lot of workshopping. So to find the cast of that film, we brought actors in and we workshopped to really find that group of people. And then when we were thinking about essentially Ben Mendelsohn's part, I mean, we just talked about a lot of actors, and I'd seen Ben, I actually can't remember what I'd seen him in, but I'd seen him in a couple of things, and I was like, I have no idea if he can do the accent, but he's an incredible actor. And we just took a punt, and actually it was the casting of Ben that kind of greenlit the film. So we were very, very lucky that he said yes.
It's such an exciting performance, and that film as a whole is, you know, you go into it thinking, I don't know, people have seen the film, but if you haven't, you really need to watch it. It's funny, which you don't expect. There's moments of real humour in it, even though there's real darkness to it. And Ben Mendelsohn's character is just, doing absolutely flawless British accent. It's unbelievable. But definitely give it a watch. And obviously Jack O'Connell.
And it was kind of one of the first films that he did. And I'd worked with him on a drama for television that Dominic Savage had directed called Dive. So I knew Jack, and actually I knew Jack. One of the first films I did on my own with another casting director was Notes on a Scandal. And Jack almost got the part, but he was too young, so we couldn't cast him. So I'd known Jack, and I knew him from the TV workshop and everything. So I was super proud that he got the lead in that. And then he went on and did 71, and then he was flying. He was great. But I love that film. Yeah.
And in terms of, as we have a lot of actors here, what would your advice be? I mean, this is the obvious question to ask, but, you know, an actor going in the room, is there any advice? I mean, I know it's such a broad question.
Yeah.
But if they are in the room anymore, on tape
Yeah.
perhaps.
I think, I think it's a really hard moment because I think there is less in the room and there's a huge amount of self-taping and Zooms. You know, Zooms are sort of also slightly taken over being in the room. I think that, I suppose there's a number of things. I think if you're being asked to do self-tapes and you feel you don't have enough information, always ask, because we try and send as much information as we can, but sometimes we're restricted on what we can share. But I think if an actor gets a scene and it makes absolutely no sense and you're not given any context and you need some kind of help in what comes before or after that scene, please ask, because I'd hope your agent would then ask us and we can send a note or something. But also, don't spend any more time on a self-tape than you would preparing for coming into the room. Because I think sometimes the danger with a self-tape is that you can go over and over and over it, and it's not good for your mental health. So I think just try and be really economic with the amount of time you spend on it. Don't overthink it. You don't need to send us 6 takes, 2 takes, 3 takes maximum. And if you're coming into the room, just remember that whatever it is, either you're taping, you're zooming, you're coming into the room because we want you to. And therefore, we're on your side, and we want you to come and do the best that you can do in that moment, and for it to feel like a safe space. And an audition is just, I've said this before, it's just a sketch. It's not the final thing. And I think sometimes actors put pressure on themselves to nail the audition. There's no such thing. You're coming in and we're experimenting with something, and that will either work or it won't work. And it's often down to, it's really hard to pinpoint why someone does and doesn't get a role. It can be chemistry thing. It can be the director's interpretation of a character. It can be the financier's interpretation of a character. It can be so many different things, but the most important thing for me is that an actor has a good time in that meeting and leaves the meeting thinking, I did the best I could in that moment, onwards.
I do miss going in the room. It's one of those things where you get to chat, you get to sort of loosen up a little bit, and maybe, you know, you can get directed, which is a huge part of being an actor. So when you're doing a tape, sometimes it feels a bit sterile.
Yeah.
But I like that you say that actually don't, you know, sometimes we're there for 6 hours trying to get a tape out, and you think
that's not good.
The first few are actually the takes you send in the end.
Yeah. And also, it's like you're actors, you're instinctive. You know, you are instinctive people. So trust your instincts and don't overanalyze something, because it is often the first couple of takes that are the truest.
And to go back to, you know, casting, you've cast some amazing films, incredible series. But I have to mention, you know, the beginning of Black Mirror, a show that has, you know, I can't even think how long that's been going now, but it's hugely successful.
Yeah.
Did you have any inkling when you were casting it that it would still be around today?
No, but I did. It was such a unique thing. You know, I'd never read anything like Black Mirror before, and I haven't since. You know, it felt like one of those rare moments in television where you had all this freedom. I never had any, when we did the show for Channel 4, there was never really any pressure on the cast. I could just find the people that I thought were right. And that's rare, because often, you know, it's all about who is front and center of the cast. Because really the scripts were the star of the show. You know, Charlie's writing, what for the inside of Charlie's head was absolutely the star. So that gave me the freedom to find the actors. And Black Mirror in those days was fast. You know, it was like, you got the script maybe 2 weeks before. I then had 2-3 weeks to cast. It then shot for 3 weeks. And in the 3rd week, you got the script for the next one. So it was a fast gig every time, because that's the way the writing kind of came together. So, But it was great because actually it was very, very creative and very collaborative.
It sounds like quite a free. You could experiment and play with it a little bit. Is there an element, when you're doing a bigger show or something that has got a lot of money behind it and expectation? Is there a pressure? I know because things have changed with social media and things like that. Is there any truth in that? If you've got loads of followers, or if you've got this, or if you've got that. Now you're a woman of integrity with your career is incredible, and I'm sure that isn't something that you deal with, but you definitely hear murmurs of that with other casting directors. Is that an element, or is that kind of something that actors tell themselves to sort of?
This is such a tricky question because, and maybe I'm naive in this, and maybe it does affect some casting directors that are maybe working in the studio system. I have absolutely no interest in how many followers someone's got. It is irrelevant to me because that's not why I'm casting them. I'm casting an actor because they're right for the role. That's it. All the other stuff is kind of stuff and nonsense. I do think that actors feel a lot of pressure on themselves now to almost be a brand, that they feel they have to curate their social media to kind of present some sort of brand. I understand why people feel that, but honestly, that doesn't affect me in the work that I do and the actors that I'm looking at in any way. I think that, there are so many really negative things about social media, and there are also really positive things. I like it because it's sharing art, and I think for that, it's how sometimes I discover musicians or artists or whoever through social media. That is a brilliant thing because it's a visual medium. Apart from that, it's kind of really not good for you. I do think, actually, the other week, I checked a bunch of actors with CAA, big American talent agency, and they sent CVs over. I asked for materials, and for the first time, I saw it said how many followers they had. And that really threw me because I was like, why are you giving me this information? Because I don't care. But why is it on their resume page? But America is a different beast, and maybe it is important there. But for me and the kind of projects I'm working on, it is absolutely not important. I've never had that conversation with a director, with a producer, with a financier, ever. But I suspect there are some casting directors that have.
I love that answer. We had Georgia Mackay on the podcast, and you've cast him many, many times.
In Peter Pan?
Yeah, Peter Pan.
In his first job, yeah.
He doesn't have social media.
No.
And as
everyone
knows,
smart.
He's smashing it. And that almost gives him that mystique of, he's like almost an actor of, like James Dean or that kind of thing where there's a mystery about him, which I think is great. But I love that you've said that, and that's not a factor. That's
but also, listen, this isn't to criticise anyone that does have it. I have it. But I think that sometimes then you put this pressure on yourself to create content because you think you need to, it keeps you relevant, it keeps you in someone's mind. I understand that, but I think it's just adding another layer to the pressure you're already feeling.
Yeah, 100%. And we can't skim past Peaky Blinders. It's heard of Peaky Blinders? Quite a big show.
It's massive.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, of course, you're from Birmingham. That makes even more sense. So with something like that, obviously, I'm sure the first series had a big budget and everything else, but it has become this. It didn't?
No.
Oh, wow.
No.
Please tell us about that.
So Peaky has never been a big budget show, and that, in a way, is the brilliant trick of what they put all the money on screen. So it had loads of ambition, masses of ambition, but no, we never had that much money to make it. No.
That's crazy. So in terms of casting it, now if we look at, it's got a lot of big names in it, but I guess if you think about it, Cillian Murphy was Cillian Murphy, get his name right. He was already, very established. But then I guess if you look at a lot of the other smaller roles, not so much, and they've all kind of grown with the show. Yeah. But that is something that I've noticed with your career. You've found a lot of actors, and you mentioned there George Mackay.
Yeah.
How do you? And I guess I'm sure there's people you cast, and then maybe they decide they don't want to be an actor. But there's been a lot of people, Florence Pugh, that have grown, and become huge stars. How do you find that talent? Is it obvious on the onset or in hindsight?
Well, going back to Peaky, Cillian had never made television before. So that was his first piece of television. And Cillian, I knew him from film. He was a brilliant, brilliant film actor. But he hadn't made television before. I didn't know if he'd want to do a piece of television. But he really, really wanted to. And he really engaged with the role. And thank God he did, because has been this kind of amazing gift to the show. But I suppose one of my favourite things about being a casting director is being at the beginning of someone's journey. Because surely that's what it's all about. It's about finding talent and nurturing talent. And, it's like a circle of that. That's my job. It's finding talent, putting them in the best place to then have a journey. And some people I've cast have not done it again, which is totally fine. It's like, especially if you're a kid, like you go and do a film, you have the best experience, and then you're like, don't know if I want to do it again. As long as you had a good time doing it, it really doesn't matter. And some people have gone on, and I look at Florence, or I look at Tom Holland, or whatever, and go on George, and it's like, it's amazing, and I'm very proud. But that is a really good reminder of me of why I do it. Because it is all about nurturing talent.
Yeah, nurturing, and also because people like George, you've cast them multiple times, and he's such a fantastic actor that he can play all these different roles. So it must be fun to think, give a go with George on this one and see what he comes up with.
But it's a really funny thing because, if you look at my work, it's quite eclectic, and sometimes you'll be like, oh, Shaheen's cast that person a number of times. But what people don't realise is that, Florence I cast in her first film, The Falling. Then everyone goes, oh, who's that person? And then when it comes to the next project I'm working on, you're seeing a whole bunch of actors. Of course, Florence is then part of that because you're seeing who are all the up-and-coming people. So that's what happened with Lady Macbeth. Florence did an absolutely extraordinary audition. She got the part. A couple of years later, she's been on a bit of a journey. She's done a few other things. I'm doing Fighting with My Family. Again, we see all the kind of profile young actresses of the time. Florence gets the part. And so that is because, I suppose, by an actor doing one film, then puts them in a place where suddenly they're in contention for other projects. And so that it's not repetition, it's just that's the way the industry works because someone's profile rises, So it's a curious thing, and like with George, it's like, I've been on a bit of a journey with George. And it's, because, if someone is asking me for a list of, 20 actors who are sort of, have got a bit of profile, doing some, he's going to be on the list.
I mean, it's crazy that's over 20 years as well, that he's, literally a child.
Yeah,
to,
he was 10, I think, when we did Peter Pan,
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. So many different all these projects they feel like your projects, but there's a lot of different things in there, different genres, different budgets. And, we talk about, finding talent. Another one would be Adolescence, and, Owen Cooper. That sounds like that was a huge open call, trying to find kids all over the north. How long was that process?
I'm trying to think. I think in total it was about 4 or 5 months, I think. But we weren't just looking for one person, young person. We were looking for a whole group of people. And I think sometimes people forget that because obviously everyone thinks about Owen. But we had a bunch of young people in that show. So I had to find all of them, and I had to make the school feel like everyone was sort of absolutely coherently linked to one another. So it was a process, and obviously a lot of those young people came along the way during the search, but Yeah, it was, I think I started the search in about the beginning of the year, and I think we shot in June or something. I can't quite remember. But yeah, that was like, it was non-specific in that it wasn't a particular place. So I chose like 5 northern cities on the map and was like, that's where we're going to focus the search. And it was a massive kind of combination of using social media to reach out, speaking to, like, literally we spend, like, always spend 2 weeks researching areas, and we research every possible route that young people, things that young people might do, places their mom or their auntie or their gran might go. I mean, it's quite, hairdressers or community centres or whatever. I mean, it's quite broad. And then we just kind of hammer it. And then we go to those areas and we street cast, and we go into the bakers and we give them a flyer, or we chat to the butcher or whatever. That's what you have to do, because it's word of mouth. And often it is somebody's auntie that has seen it in the window of the newsagent. That's often how it happens.
I love that you literally go out there and you find people that don't know they want to be found. I love that.
Yeah, but because, unless you're actively looking every day on social media, how would you know? Unless you've got an amazing teacher at school who maybe thinks that might be your ambition. It might not be your ambition, you're just at school. I think unless you've got a family that have the time to look for these opportunities for you, you have to go to them. And I think sometimes in this industry, there's an arrogance of, no, you come to me. And it's like, no, you've got to go to them. And particularly if you're going out into the regions, because this is such a often London-centric industry. There's a whole country. And, we do a lot of work all over the country. You go there and you look for those people, because why would they come to you?
Well, 100%. And with those parts, was there any sort of, because obviously on set, if someone is under a certain age, they can only do limited hours. Was there ever a sort of idea that maybe you would cast a little bit older to look younger, or?
Yeah, originally we took, because obviously the nature of the shoot was so unusual, we did talk originally about maybe casting the kids over 16, and then we very, very quickly realised it didn't work, because the whole power of the story is the youth of those characters. So we very quickly reverted back.
I mean, it's I'm sure a lot of people have seen it. It's such an incredible show, and the fact that it's all shot in one shot as well. It must have been, finding an actor or any of the actors in the show to be able to sort of, seems like a lot of pressure, especially if it's someone that hasn't got much experience.
Yeah.
The pressure of, those long shots right at the end of the episode, and you think that guy's got one line right at the end. Don't screw that up, because everyone else will be like, what are you doing? Was that a factor in, was there a lot of auditions and rehearsals and stuff in the build up to it?
There were the regular amount of auditions. For the kids, we did a lot of workshops. We did a lot of improv auditions. We did a lot of chemistry reads and a workshop. So for the kids, we did more than the adults, for sure. But with the adult actors, I guess we were looking for actors that, even though we had these extraordinary scripts by Jack, actors that felt comfortable improvising, because anything could have happened at any time. So you needed actors that could just think on their feet. And for me, like, someone that had one role was as important as Ashley Walters or Christine Tremarco, because you don't want to you can't break it. And so the way we did it, it was like a week of rehearsals, a week of tech runs, and then a week of shooting. And that's how it was done. And it was just repetition, repetition, repetition. And for the kids, I mean, I'm in awe of the young cast, because for an adult actor, that is a hard enough gig. But for the kids who had mostly not done anything before, I mean, that was really hard. But it was an amazing production in terms of support. We made sure that the cast had a really good time and they had fun. And there was a huge amount of care on set. And I think that really does make a difference, because the actors, young and older, felt safe, and they felt that they were being held by the production team. And I think that really goes a long way, particularly if you're working with people who have never done it before.
So your job really doesn't end at the casting. It's like, you know, still being there to support the young cast.
Yeah.
And I love that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
If you guys have got any questions, have a little think. I've got one more question for you, but if you've got something, let us know. What is the most important lesson that your parents taught you?
Oh my God.
Sorry, I had to go deep on the last one.
It's deep. You could have given me like a heads up. That
Right
was
at the end.
Oh my gosh.
It doesn't have to be deep. It could be something small.
Gosh, well, my mum and dad, but my dad often had 3 or 4 jobs at a time. So I guess work, the importance of work ethic, be kind to people, be respectful. My dad was like, people loved him. Like, he was really a sweet, lovely, honest man. And yeah, I think just treat people as you want them to treat you. I think that definitely. And also just have a good time doing it. Like, we laughed a lot. I laughed a lot with my mum and dad. And so in my office, we laugh a lot, because at the end of the day, it's not brain surgery. We are very, very privileged to do the job we do. And I feel very lucky to do the job I do. And I work really, really hard. But there are people doing jobs way harder and getting paid a lot less money. And just don't forget that.
I think that's a good way to end. Thank you so much. So if we do, does anyone have any questions? Raise your hand. Right, I'm going to now do a run around. I'll go with you first, because you're nice and close.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm wondering if you have any tips for... Some people, to me, seem like they're really in the know. And I feel like I'm the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips for how to get in the know?
So I know that feeling, because that's the feeling I had when I started off, you know, trying to get jobs on my own. I also think social media could contribute to that a little bit, because it can always feel like somebody else is doing something, they know about something that I don't. I suppose the best thing I can say is just try and plug yourself in. Are you an actor? Yeah. So try and plug yourself into as many actor communities as you can. And because I think, it will stop you feeling so alone. You know, it might help you if you're in a community of other actors and you're all kind of going after the same thing. It's also really good to be around other creative people all the time, because it kind of feeds you. So I think just try and research, you know, at community of actors, people who are maybe making short films. I think that is really important. Obviously, you know, there are lots of casting directors now on social media, so they will often put on social media if they're doing any kind of open casting. Are you represented?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that I see like everything.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
So then I would say trying to make yourself part of communities with people that are doing the same things as you, that you feel something in common with, I think is really, really important. Okay. There's a lot of questions.
Hi.
Hi.
So I've had a very varied career, done performing. I now do theatre critic.
Yeah.
I've always been told I'd be a very good casting director. I've done a little bit of casting just in like the drag scene randomly.
Yeah.
What's the best way maybe to transition into that now?
So there's lots of different ways. I mean, I think, you know, one way is you could write to a whole bunch of casting directors and ask if you could come and do a bit of work experience. It's really hard, because casting has for a long time been quite a hidden industry, and also it has often attracted quite middle class people, because I think back in the day you had to be financially quite comfortable to be a casting director, you know, because you might only do 2 or 3 jobs a year, whereas I think it's changed, but I think also the way the industry works is expanding. And Gina and I created a course with the National Film and Television School, which is a casting assistant course, in order to open up the industry and make it fairer. Because I think unless you know someone who knows someone, it's really hard to know how on earth, because you can't go and study casting, i.e. like you can hair and makeup or costume or editing or cinematography. So have a look at the course, because it's part-time, it's 1 day a week, 1 evening a week, and we purposely did that so people can work, because everyone needs to work. And we take people from all over the country, but it's like we're teaching someone like the basics of being able to go into a casting office and know what you're doing. So that is one option. But it's also like, look at all the casting directors, the things you like, write to them. And maybe someone might give you a little bit of work experience. But also something you can do is keep a record of who you're watching and who you like, and sort of curate your own sort of taste and list of people. Because if you go to an interview with a casting office, they're going to ask you, who have you seen? What are you watching? What do you like? Is there an actor in a small part in something you've kind of clocked a couple of times? So all of that is work you can do yourself, but it really is kind of reaching out to people. I hate that expression, reaching out. Contacting people, but also have a look at the course. We've just finished interviews for this next cohort, but it will start again next year. Okay.
Okay, I had the same question. Hello.
Hi.
What makes you say yes or no to a project?
It's a combination of things. 9 times out of 10, it's the script. But sometimes I don't get a script. Sometimes I get a synopsis. Sometimes I get a book. Sometimes I work with directors where it's improvised. So it generally is about the story that they want to tell, and if I feel a connection to that story. I think as I've got older, I've found I want to work more on things that I feel a kind of personal connection to. But it is always about, have I worked on a project like this before? What is the story they're trying to tell? Do I feel like it has something to say? Who are the people making the story? Do I want to work with them? Do they want to work with me? Will we actually have a happy collaboration? Those, I think, really. So it's like, what are the bones of the story? And also, I really like to do things I've never done before, and genres, or, you know, and like I've started to do the odd play. I mean, literally I've done 3, not many, but I love it because it's not a muscle I've used particularly. And it's like, I want to keep it, not fresh, that's a naff word, but I want to make sure I'm as engaged in it now as I was 20 years ago.
Hello.
Hi.
You talked about finding new talent, and I've heard some kind of conflicting advice on this for actors that are early in their career. How do you feel about them writing to you? Or do you think it's better just, as you said, to do the best work you can and let the casting directors come across your work?
I mean, actors write every day. I think absolutely that's kind of how this, of course, write. I think that what is tricky is that casting directors or casting offices get a huge volume of emails every day. So I think it's like picking your moment when to write. So I think write to a casting office when you feel you've got something to say, i.e. you're about to be in something, or you've just done something you're proud of, or you've just graduated, or you're about, it's something that feels like you can sort of pin a marker to it. Also, don't forget that within a casting office, there are casting assistants. So I think often people write to the casting director when the casting director is the busiest person in that office. So make sure you are also writing to the other people in the office, because they are more likely to be able to respond or to come and see you in something. So, and also make sure that whatever is in your email or your letter I mean, if anyone writes an actual letter these days, is that it's truthful. You know, that your photograph looks like you and you don't embellish anything. You're just honest about who you are, where you're at this point in your career, and what you hope for. Okay?
Thank you. Hello.
Hi.
It's really lovely to just sit here and listen to you, because I do feel like, as probably a lot of actors feel, I feel like the art of it, as like that's the essence to us, sometimes in trying to get a job or in trying to enter this business kind of gets lost. And I feel like the way that this beast of a business works often kind of breaks the soul of an actor at times. I guess my question is, a huge challenge for actors if they don't have the money to go to a drama school or come from a very prestigious academy, is signing that agent and getting that representation, because there's always a request for credits. And I guess my question is, how do you potentially come across actors who aren't represented? Does that ever pop up? Is there ever a way that you see, other than you searching for them in places in the UK? And yeah, because I think that's like a huge thing, is you know, always sending the emails and saying you're not credited yet, but it's like, in order to get the credits, it's you can source that independently, but that's a work of a lifetime, which is obviously not easy. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's really hard, and I can't speak for agents in terms of what it is they're looking for. Again, I think this sort of slightly goes back to creating communities with other actors and creating your own work, because I think more and more people are doing that now in order to be, to keep the muscle going, but also to be more visible. The other thing that I've sort of said to actors before is, you may not have any on-screen credits, so you may be in Spotlight if you can afford to be in Spotlight, and you might have, you know, CV, but you may not have a reel. You might not have anything you can put on there. So what I've said to actors before is to film something of yourself. It doesn't have to be fancy, but often I think it's really, really good to film a monologue that feels quite close to you. So I think sometimes the temptation is to film something with a character that is a million miles away from you, or 20 years older or something. And actually, I think it's really good to film something that you feel a real connection to, because then what casting directors are looking at is something that's quite truthful. And I think that in the absence of any other material, I think, you know, and I've seen actors do it, and I've advised actors to do it. They can be so brilliant, because if you're writing to a casting office and you're able to attach something which is short, like it's 5 minutes or something, but it really represents you in a very truthful way, that can be more powerful often than a show reel that has been kind of scraped together, trying to show every single bit of something you've ever done. Because I don't love show reels. Like, I tend to avoid show reels. I'd rather see one thing that you feel really proud of, or when you look at your CV, let's say you're lucky enough to have several credits, what are the jobs on your CV that you have learnt the most from, or that you feel like it's really changed your path? Those are the jobs that I want to see, rather than volume. So I think maybe have a think about that. I think also, and I know they cost money, and maybe some cost less than others, are workshops. My office I don't do workshops just because I don't live in London, and you know, just the hours are long as they are, but have a look at workshops, because I think sometimes it is a good way to meet casting directors and casting assistants. There are some really good legit ones, and there are some really dodgy ones. So it's like, take advice from your fellow actors about which ones are good. because some of them you get really great feedback and they're properly collaborative, and some are just money-making schemes. So just do your research well.
Thank you so much.
All right. You could ask a joint question.
Hi, Shaheen.
Hello.
I'm Rohan, this is Aang. We're both
Hi.
actors going into our 3rd year at RADA. We wanted to ask your advice on how to navigate this ever-changing industry as brown actors, where there isn't really a defined scope of what we're capable of doing or what roles are for us within Western media.
Gosh, that's another deep question.
I try.
Well, I would say, God, it's really hard. You know, it's like when I think back to, you know, when I started in casting and what the sort of 2 buzzwords I hate, representation and diversity, but I'm going to use them in this conversation because I just guess I need to. You know, when I actually sort of feel maybe when I first started in casting, the industry was more progressive in some ways than it is now. Because I think, you know, it just felt like it was, people were easier afforded opportunities maybe than they are now. I think what's happening now is people are sort of overthinking things, and they are sort of slightly preventing actors from getting jobs because everyone's worried about offending somebody. Everybody's worried about, I don't want to reflect a community negatively. A good actor the best actor should get the part regardless. Full stop. So it's my job as a casting director to make sure, unless a character is based on a real person, unless there's a legitimate reason if you're connecting 2 actors together, to make sure that the group of actors I bring into the room for that part are properly representative. That's my responsibility. That is a casting director's responsibility to do that. And then the actor that is the most right for the part gets the role. That's how it should work. But we know it's not as simple as that, because the majority of work that's commissioned isn't really truthfully representative. Often the people making the decisions about what is commissioned isn't always truthfully representative. So, and then the lens of maybe the director that is put in place to direct it isn't hugely. So it's almost like we need all these changes to come from the top. The people making the decisions, well, they need to expand their lens. The people that are writing the stories, that needs to be expanded. The people that are directing them, the people that are going through film school, that needs to be expanded. So all of those things are starting to happen, but they're slow. And you know, and you know, I feel that too as a brand casting director. You know, sometimes I get pigeonholed. It can happen, and sometimes it's a film set in India, I get sent it. You know, it is kind of how this industry can work. But I think that what I've tried to do is, I suppose, really try and seek those projects that I feel, where I felt that is progressive, positive representation. So I have actively kind of wanted to work with young brown filmmakers that I feel are telling a story that I've not seen on screen before. And I, you know, passionately want to do shows like Bait that I did with Riz Ahmed, because it's incredibly rare that I would get to cast a show that is a predominantly brown cast. I mean, that just doesn't happen. But for me, that is a real, I'm super proud of that show, because it's really hard to get shows like that made. You know, so it's like I can try and be, with the decisions I make, I can try and keep pushing forward. And the people that I bring into the room, I can try and keep pushing forward. But we're not there yet, you know? And I think that you have to trust your instinct. And if you're being sent something that you feel isn't right, don't do it. Even if you're at the beginning of your career. And that can be really hard. It can be really hard to hold on, I think, to those values. But ultimately, it's like, you know, for me, there were, way back at the beginning, there were projects I was sent that I didn't want to cast because they were maybe full of tropes or stereotypes. And so I would just work at the theatre extra 4 nights or 5 nights or whatever I needed to do in order to pay the bills, not to cast that project. And that's not me putting myself on a pedestal. It's just about trying to stay true to who you are. And, you know, if I use someone like Riz as an example, you know, Riz, made a decision to turn down roles, which is really hard in his career, at a point where, you know, if he'd have done some of those films, it could have changed the kind of trajectory of his career, but he didn't. And he's kind of played the long game, and that has been really hard. And again, you look at someone like Himesh Patel, they're making really clever choices. And I just think as much as you possibly can, hold on to that. If something doesn't feel good in your gut, don't do it. Or if the reasoning behind it isn't good, don't do it.
Brilliant, thank you so much.
Okay, all right. Good luck, both of you. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Last question.
God, that was like...
Hey Shaheen,
Hi.
thank you so much. The Journeyman was like, with Paddy Considine, was one of my favourite like British films of the past 10, 15 years. I read somewhere that although Paddy Considine is like one of the best British actors, and it was his film, he wasn't enough of a name to get it made or something. Is that true? Is that like, did you have to sort of fight for him to make his film?
Well, we went on a bit of a journey. See what I did there? I didn't even realise. No, I mean, we did. And Paddy never was going to play the role. That was never in contention. And then we just had many conversations and kind of went round and round in circles. You know, it's really hard to get a film made. Then and now, it's really hard. And everyone would be really shocked if they knew the very, very small amount of actors that actually can greenlight a film in this country. There's probably 5. And then you've probably got another 20 that could greenlight a film in conjunction with another actor. It's tiny. And so often, it's really interesting when I'm like talking to like members of my family or mates and stuff, and they're like, why is that actor always in everything? It's like, because if they weren't in it, that show wouldn't have got made. Or if that person wasn't fronting that film, it would have never happened. And so you have to kind of pick your battles with any kind of film financing. Often because I love to cast people, maybe not known or cast them in a different way. You sort of go, okay, well, if I give them that element, it means I can get this. So it is always so with Journeyman, we did go down a route of thinking about all these actors that would tick the box and da-da-da. It just didn't feel right. And then we persuaded Paddy. And it was a very, very tough job for him because he was playing a really complex character and he was directing, and he probably wouldn't do that again. I think he said quite openly, I don't want to do that again. He did a beautiful job, but it really was hard. It was really, really hard for him. But that was quite a last-minute decision. The same with Urchin, a film I did that Harris Dickinson directed. Like, he was never going to be in the film. That was never a discussion. And we cast Frank Delane, and he was brilliant. And then there was another part, and an actor dropped out for logistical reasons. And so Harris stepped in because we were like at the 11th hour, and he'd been rehearsing with the actors, like he knew all the lines, but he didn't want to. He wanted to just direct the film. And sometimes you find yourself in that position because you want what's best for the film. Yeah.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Well, I think we all need to give a huge round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. I really appreciate it. It's a big room full of a lot of people, so thanks for coming down in the morning, and thank you again.
It's a real pleasure. I haven't got my glasses on, so I'm like, I can't. So from about midway, I'm like, I can't focus. But I'm really chuffed so many of you came at like 9 o'clock in the morning. So thank you. And whether you're going off to work or whatever you're doing, have a really good day. All right, thank you.